Hey, Dr. C here again. Good to see everybody again. It's almost springtime now, so we need to talk about more spring-like things, I guess. Today we're going to follow up on the cholesterol talk that I gave. We're going to talk a little bit about huevos, les œufs. You know those things, the eggs. We're going to talk about eggs. You think since it's been around for centuries, that we should know just about everything there is about eggs, and there should be no controversy. Ha! Hey, that's not the way things are. Everything seems to be controversial, you know? So let's talk a little bit and go into some depth about eggs. Eggs go back at least 7,500 years when they were first mentioned as foodstuff. Even the Greeks used quail eggs way back 800-900 BC. The Romans used it. That used to be the first course in some of their big meals that they had. And they would always crush up the eggshells because they believed that by crushing up those eggshells and all, having them at the meal, it would ward off evil spirits. Maybe we should do that. Maybe it will ward off a few things, you know. So even in France, they didn't allow you to eat eggs during Lent. You know, that reminds me too of, nowadays some of the bishops are saying that you shouldn't really get that J&J vaccine, you know, because they used some embryos back in the early days of research. You know, nonsense. So, at any rate, a long-standing history of eggs. Obviously, a lot of creatures lay eggs. Eggs are part of our procreation. It's the way we advance our society and all. Everybody has eggs, not just animals, but birds, fish. A lot of mammals and all have eggs, but a little different eggs, but they all have that same function. They can all be fertilized and then regenerate a new generation of whatever the animal or fish is. But we consume a lot of bird eggs, so that's what we're going to talk about, the bird eggs. Chickens mainly, you know. So let's talk a little bit about it. We eat over 200 eggs per adult a day. A lot of eggs, but we're not number one. No, China's number one in the number of eggs produced and eaten. We're number two. India's number three, Japan number four. What does that mean? Nothing, obviously, but, you know, an interesting statistic. So let's talk a little bit about first the anatomy of an egg. Now, should be simple, right? Yeah, well, it is simple. There's that outer shell, the coating, the outer shell. The outer shell itself is made up mostly of calcium carbonate, but it's also very porous. It's porous. It can allow stuff in and out. It's porous. So that is a big deal. Some people get tied up with the color of the egg, you know, white versus brown versus blue-green, whatever, you know. It really makes no difference as far as the nutritional value of the egg itself. It just happens to be that certain species of the chickens produce the white eggs, some species produce the brown eggs. So they say it depends a lot on the color of the ears and all, but I don't know. If you have a white earlobe, you produce a white egg. Red earlobe, you produce a brown egg. I don't know. I don't care. Nutritional value is the same. Generally, that egg, as I said, is very porous. And we're going to talk about that as well. And then just inside the shell itself, there are two separate, very thin membranes, inner and outer membrane. They're very thin, made up mostly of collagen. That membrane can be used as a dressing over a wound, for example, and it will help to protect that wound from the outside environment and assist in healing of the wound. That was noted many, many, many centuries ago, and they used that actually to do that sort of thing. So you have the two membranes then, the inner and the outer membrane of collagen. Then inside that, you have the white of the egg and then the yolk, which is suspended within the white of the egg. Now, what's the purpose of these things? Well, the purpose is the yolk has a lot of calories. That's enough to sustain that little embryo, if it becomes an embryo, to sustain that embryo until it becomes a full-fledged chicken. Then there's the white of the egg, in which that yolk is suspended. That's mostly albumin, but a lot of protein, a lot of good protein in that white of the egg. So that is what the content is of that. Then there's some little things, what they call chelae. These little chelae hold that yolk in place. That's just, again, little proteins that are in that chelae. And you'll see them, little strings that will attach that yolk in the center. What else is in there? Well, you also have a little air cell. You notice that the egg itself is a little broader on one end, narrower on the other. Well, on that broad end, there's a little air cell. That air cell is very tiny when the egg is first laid. That gets larger as the egg ages. That's important. And I'll mention why it's important in a second. So those are all of the things that are within that particular anatomy of the egg. Let's talk about the nutritional value of the egg now. Obviously, the shell doesn't have much nutritional value, although it does have calcium carbonate, and that calcium can be used. You use it, for example, in a garden. You crush it up in the garden. It's good calcium, good for the plant. So that's part of the nutritional value of the egg, obviously. And also the white of the egg. What about that white of the egg? What's in it? Well, not too many calories. There are about roughly 17 calories in the typical white egg, or any egg, basically, because they're all pretty similar. And so you have that as well. 17 calories and about 4 grams of protein. And what is important about the white of the egg? Well, we're going to talk about some of the uses of it later. But nevertheless, those are the two major things, the calories and the protein value. What about the yolk? I said that yolk can sustain the life of that embryo until it finally does hatch and becomes a little chicken itself. So they're roughly in the yolk about 55 calories. So the total, 17 and 55, so that's basically, 72 calories. So that's the average large egg, 72 calories. 210 milligrams of cholesterol in that yolk. So this always leads to some controversy. Well, does eating eggs increase your cholesterol? Who the hell cares? Remember I told you when we did the cholesterol talk, it isn't the cholesterol itself that's important. It's what transports that cholesterol, the LDL. That's the important factor. Now, does eating eggs affect cholesterol or LDL? Controversial. Why? Because One study will say it doesn't. In fact, 2 out of 3 studies say it doesn't. A third of the studies say it does. And of course, the reporter who may talk to the person who did this study, I guess you can call it. It's not peer-reviewed study. Generally, there are very few peer-reviewed studies that go out about this. But that reporter will report it on the headlines, eggs may be bad. May. They always say may because they're not sure, of course. Well, they don't know it. They don't know what they're talking about. But, that's why all of this propaganda is in the papers and all. So don't always believe what you read. What else is in that yolk? Well, there's fat in the yolk. There's fat. But most of the fat is unsaturated fat. It's good fat. Good fat. Yeah, there is a little bit of saturated fat in there too, but that's converted to good fat. It is not bad fat. No trans fats, no other bad fats within the yolk. Many other things of nutritional value are in that yolk as well. For example, omega-3 fatty acids, 93 milligrams. Remember, we use that omega-3 to try to reduce our triglyceride levels in the body. There's a whole bunch of vitamins that are in the yolk as well. All of the fat vitamins, A, D, E, and K, especially that A. Why do I say that? Because there's also 2 other elements in the yolk, lutein and zeaxanthin. Now, those 2, the lutein and the zeaxanthin, those are for eye health. Eye health. So the combination of the A and the other 2 are great for eye health. There's also a number of different B vitamins, including B1, B6, B12, all in that egg yolk. There's also a thing called lecithin. Lecithin. That is an emulsifier. That's what we use lecithin for. And so that way there, it can be either water soluble or oil soluble, basically, because it has that lecithin in it. And finally, there's also choline. Choline. That is an element that's in all of our cell membranes. So you need choline. In fact, it's a vitamin, choline. And that's also within that yolk. Now, does the color of the yolk mean anything? Because it comes in different shades of that yellow gold color. Well, it depends on the diet of the chicken and the species of the chicken, but mostly the diet. For example, I believe it's marigolds that Purdue feeds its chickens, because the marigold, the yellow in the marigold, will get into not just the yolk, but also into the chicken meat itself and give it a little golden color, which supposedly is a good thing. I don't know. When that chicken first lays that egg, that yolk is nice and round. And then as time goes on, it flattens a little bit, becomes more discoid. Also, the white of the egg, which is mainly protein, remember, a lot of albumin in that as time goes on, thins a little bit, thins. Because at first it's really almost a gel consistency, and then in time it thins. Now, what do these things mean? You got changes in the yolk, changes in the white of the egg, and you have changes in the air sac. The air sac gets larger as time goes on. They use those things to grade the eggs. So you may have a AA grade, a grade A, or a grade B. Most of the stuff you buy in the store is a grade A egg. So, at any rate, just some of the things that I find very interesting. Also, besides the grading, they also use the not just the grading, but the classes of the eggs. In other words, when you go and buy a dozen eggs and in the store, and you say, gee, they're not all the same size. Well, they don't have to be. The total weight, that's the thing that is giving you that particular class. So the class may be, for example, a jumbo egg. It may be a large egg, extra large egg, medium-sized egg, small egg, pullet egg. All these different classes of eggs. The ones we usually buy in a store are either medium, large, and extra large. We rarely see jumbo eggs, although they are. I've seen them in the stores, but jumbo eggs. Now, when you talk about a real jumbo egg, what about the ostrich? I mean, that egg is 2 kilograms. That's a huge egg. Huge egg. That's the equivalent of 3 dozen of those chicken eggs. Talking about the sizes. But at any rate, yeah, what they do is they weigh the eggs, and if that dozen is up to a certain number of milligrams, and a certain number of ounces, it's a dozen of large eggs, for example. So it goes all the way from 30 grams all the way down to roughly 20 grams. So the jumbo, extra large, large, depends. For a large egg, it should be 24 grams total. That's all. So don't worry about the different sizes that you see in the eggs. Okay, let's go on. So let's talk a little bit more about how we prepare them. Let's talk about the culinary aspect of these. When you heat an egg, you see a change then. The white then solidifies and you have a white area. And the yolk itself deepens in color a little bit. Okay. Does that change the nutritional value? It does. Because any cooked egg, anything that's been heated, the egg that's been heated, is not, it gets absorbed a lot better than, say, a raw egg. So if I compare my cooked egg to, say, what Rocky drank when he took that glass full of raw eggs and all, I got more out of it because I could digest more of the protein. The heating combined a lot of those protein molecules and they're easily absorbed. So I can absorb a lot more of them when they're cooked as opposed to raw. Now there is some advantage to the raw egg. The raw egg probably has a little more of the vitamin A and a couple more of the vitamins are in a little larger concentration, but otherwise not terribly different other than can you digest the stuff? And that's the important element for me. I can digest that cooked egg. What is the best way to cook it? How can you get the most value out of it? Well, soft-boiled. Soft-boiled seems to be the best one as far as nutritional value goes. So right under that are the poached eggs. And then the raw egg, then the hard-boiled egg, and then the sunny side egg, and then over easy egg, and finally that poor old scrambled egg, right down the bottom of the nutritional value, but still an excellent nutritional value. Okay, so heat does make a difference. Can you freeze an egg? Does that still have its nutritional value? Well, the answer is yes, you can freeze the egg. But you don't take the egg itself. What you got to do is you crack it, you put it into one of these muffin containers. So you can do maybe a dozen at a time. Freeze it, put it into a baggie after it's frozen, and then take it out when you need it. So you don't have to waste eggs. How do you know if an egg that you have, how do you know if it's fresh, how do you know if it's probably something you don't want to eat? In other words, it's not just stale, but it's probably on its way to get spoiled. Well, very simple. You take a glass of water, you put the egg in it. If the egg goes down to the bottom and stays there, it's a fresh egg. Because remember that air pocket that's in the egg, that's the thing that's important. Now, if it floats to the top, you probably should throw it away. So in between, let's say that it's an in-between egg. That will be vertical, usually, with the air pocket at the top, and it's suspended more towards the bottom than towards the top, but it's not floating. You can still eat that egg, but probably don't leave a long time before you go and eat it. So that's a simple way to check the freshness of your eggs. Now, what about the flavor of the egg? That depends a lot on the diet of the bird. And there are lots of folklore about which species of chicken is best for egg laying and all. The people who raise eggs, and there's a lot of people, individuals who still raise chickens. I know there's one practically in our backyard, raise chickens for the eggs and all. It takes roughly about 18 to 25 weeks if you get a laying hen. It takes about 18 to 25 weeks before they start laying. And on an average, they'll lay about an egg a day. On an average. And you can usually expect any individual chicken to lay roughly 600 plus eggs in its lifetime. When the productivity begins to go down considerably, those chickens are then sold off for meat. So that happens. Okay, so depends on the species, as I say, of the chicken that you get. So there are different rates of productivity depending on the species of the chicken. What do you feed a chicken? Well, they're omnivores. They eat everything. If you make them into vegetarians, they're not going to do as well. They're not going to lay as well. So you've got to also watch the temperature you keep them at. You got to keep a light on all the time. They produce, especially when it's light, so they have light in their chicken coops. And now these chicken coops are huge. These aviaries now, massive aviaries. A lot of different things that you see on the labels of the eggs that you buy. You may see that it's caged. Well, what does that mean? That means that it's retained in this cage all the time. Can't really move, can't do things at all. 95% of all our eggs come from caged chickens. And of course, there's people out there now who are advocating for cage-free type chickens. Now, what does that mean if it's officially cage-free? Well, you put them into a 10 by 12 inch cage where they can at least move around a little bit. And they're allowed to roam, but they don't usually leave their little barracks that they have. They don't go outdoors that much. So these are the big aviaries that you see. Also, you'll see a term free range. What does that mean? Well, a free range chicken is given a space, maybe a 5-6 foot space, where they can go out and walk around a little bit. That's all it means, free range. You could also get a pasture free. Now the pasture free, those are the true free range, where the chickens can go wandering around the yard and all. So those are probably the best ones to get. You'll see on the label sometimes hormone free. Well, what does that mean? Doesn't mean a damn thing, because the FDA banned hormones in chickens back in the 1950s. So it shouldn't be given hormones anyway. You'll see the term organic. What is an organic egg? Well, that just means that the feed itself has to be free of pesticides, herbicides, and GMOs. And you have to have some required outdoor time. They don't define how much, however. Some of the things you'll see are omega-3 enriched eggs, where they actually add this to the feed. They give them more flex feed, flax feed. That gives them the omega-3. You'll see some of them saying that they're natural eggs. What the hell is a natural egg? Nobody knows. You can also pasteurize an egg. If you heat the egg at 135 degrees for an hour and a half, you're pasteurizing it. That's how they pasteurize milk. They pass it through these tubes, 135 degrees for an hour and a half. That's pasteurized milk. You'll see on there some of them farm fresh, certified humane. Again, doesn't mean a damn thing. Good for marketing, maybe increase the price a little bit, but it doesn't mean anything in terms of the quality or nutrition of that egg. Okay. What other uses do we have of eggs? Well, a big use of it is in production of vaccines. For example, the flu vaccine. Flu vaccine, they inject the particular flu virus injected into that egg, right through the porous membrane, inject it in, and they'll grow an antigen in there. And so then they break the egg open, and then they produce the vaccine, the antibody to that egg, to the antigen. Okay, that's how they produce the flu vaccine. So they produce it in eggs. So there's a huge number of eggs that the federal government will buy every year to produce flu vaccine. They also use, remember I mentioned the calcium supplements, both for plants and for animal food. They use eggs as a facial cleanser. They can use the yolk of the egg as a moisturizer as well. You can use it as a hair conditioner. You can use it to cure a hangover. You've probably heard these things, a prairie oyster, where they use not just the egg itself, but Tabasco and I believe they also use Worcestershire and hot sauce. It's all, and salt and pepper. That's a prairie oyster. So we also color them, Easter eggs. We can make a glue, add a little bit of flour to it, make a glue out of it. Loads of different things you can do with these eggs. Remember though, the egg always comes out of a cloaca. The cloaca is also, it's a common depository for fecal content as well. So that egg has to pass through there. So all of the eggs in the United States are washed. They're washed. Therefore, you have to refrigerate them. In Europe, they don't wash the eggs, so you don't have to refrigerate the eggs. So, okay. I think we've kind of entertained a lot of the things about eggs. I didn't get into the controversy, though, of the whether you should eat them or not. I advocate you can eat 2 eggs a day and don't worry about it because it's going to be good for you. This is Dr. C. Enjoy your eggs. Have a good day.